Hey guys, this is Alex from the Survivor Torch Snuffers podcast, and today I'm going to be delivering a last minute edition of the Secret Scenes Roundup for the last 2 weeks because things have been very busy on a work level on my end as of late. So, first of all, let's talk very briefly about the episode before this previous one. This was before the merge, so any strategic information from then would be pretty irrelevant by now, but the more interesting stuff was actually had to do more with the experience of the game. For example, Ken had a very eloquent confessional about how he's already dreading going back to real life because he loves being on the island so much. And Adam talks about how losing the reward challenges is actually not that bad because it sort of prepares you to, not have a sense of entitlement going forward and to, just work with what you got because what you got is, literally is just what you got. And Jessica also says that she expected to be hungrier than she is, but she keeps winning food rewards, so missing out on the personal chef was actually not that devastating. Hannah also had a pretty funny one where she called the Ikabula camp, which they no longer have to live on, a barren wasteland and a hell beach of flies. And in one of this week's scenes, she describes it as having gone from Vanilla to Ikabula and back as being to hell and back. And the secret scene was also pretty hilarious. I recommend you go watch it. I think it's called Michelle and the Dragons. And so Michelle, dearly departed Michelle, talks about how, Marco Polo, when he was visiting China, he wrote about how, they had dragons. And so this is evidence that dragons are real. And why doesn't this appear in the textbooks? And it's a conspiracy. And Zeke and Chris have a couple of lines about how, you're on Survivor, we tend to try to work in the real world, so maybe the whole dragons thing is a little bit, suspect. And now, for this week, Zeke has a good short scene where he is just standing on the beach the night after the merge, looking up at the stars and says, I came out here to destroy people, but you have to appreciate the little things. Just no light pollution, just be able to see the stars, just eat a sandwich. So that was fun. Interestingly, Brett, when talking about reuniting with his former Gen X pals, said he was more scared to meet Jessica again than David, given the recency of what the events were at the Gen X camp. And Jay also has a good point that I had not previously considered, that when you're merging 3 tribes at once, the shock to your system in terms of all the new people that you're having to meet is way bigger than if it's just a 2-tribe merge. And so it's a lot of information to try to take in at once. And Sunday says she is planning to step up to the situation and says that, now it's merged, she can't hang back anymore. This implies that she has been hanging back previously, which I would guess is why she hasn't been getting that many confessionals. And Ken also has an excellent point. The more worried you are coming into the merge, the more likely you are to make mistakes. And he actually thinks he's been safer playing a better game playing from the bottom because he hasn't had to, really conceal secrets from anyone and try to maintain his position on the top because he hasn't had a position on the top yet. And that Paul, Lucy, and Michelle have all had, a bit of an air about them that they were safe before they went and that he could tell. So it's an interesting perspective. I wouldn't necessarily recommend trying to stay out of power, but make the best of it if you happen to be in that situation. Chris has an interesting confessional where he talks about being a trial lawyer and how that actually prepares you well for Survivor, because you have to essentially make the jury, which, is a trial jury, not a Survivor jury, but similar concept, sort of think that they had an idea that you put there, so you have to be subtle. And he calls it spreading the tentacles of danger to the jury. Sexy. Hannah admits with regards to the immunity challenge that she played up her nerdy persona when she was holding her arm in the air and saying, my face hurts, everything hurts. But that, she appreciates the individual challenges more than the team wins, because it means that, being average is a good thing. And it doesn't mean that you're a liability. And so she can just be average and not have to throw the challenge, do her best, kind of suck, and that's a good thing. In a secret scene, Hannah and Ken have a good bonding moment. Now, this is interesting because the secret scenes, as differentiated from the confessionals, the secret scenes are like, as far as I can tell, the last thing to be cut from the episode when they were finalizing what would be on the air. And so that means, some people interpret that as meaning that, oh, well, this part wasn't important, so this doesn't happen. To me, what that shows is that this is something that was just important enough to be part of the edit, but then got cut for time reasons. So it's still part of the edit. And so Ken talks about, being one of the weirdos. And Hannah talks about, liking being one of the weirdos. And they want to show the world that weirdos have something to offer the game. And so that might be he might end up being, closer to the trio of nerds that currently occupy the swing position in the tribe than to the rest of the Gen Xers, which would be fairly consistent with how he's been portrayed so far. I'd be interested to see if that happens. And finally, a note on Ponderosa. Michelle talks about, both in her Ponderosa video and in her exit interviews, how her fatal mistake in the game was not taking control of what she calls the relational aspect. And this is something that you should probably keep in mind if you're planning on going on Survivor anytime soon or playing in an org or whatever. If you stop strategizing with people think that you're strategizing with someone other than them, not that you're hanging back. If you don't strategize at all from the beginning, then people will think you're not strategizing. But if you lay off the gas, they're thinking, she's flipped. And that is what she says her fatal mistake in the game of Survivor was. That, she was told she was being a threat, and so she backed off. And the merge is not the time to back off. So that's a summary of what has been happening in Survivor the last 2 weeks, and I will try to have this week's Secret Scene Roundup up in a more timely fashion. So see ya, and hope tonight's episode is bazonkers.